Sarah barely recognized herself in the mirror. Thomas's street contacts had worked magic. A subtle prosthetic nose, carefully applied age lines, and colored contacts transformed her into Andrea Martinez, a patient seeking experimental treatment for early-onset Alzheimer's. The perfect cover to infiltrate Boston General's new neurology wing, Emma's domain. "Everything's linked to your sister's private server," whispered Raj, a former ET specialist who'd escaped another Project Mirror facility. He'd helped Sarah hack into the hospital's network through a maintenance terminal. Patient records, trial data, and something else. Some kind of real-time consciousness monitoring program. Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard, her medical credentials helping her decode Emma's research notes. The clinical trials weren't just about memory transfer anymore. They were about synchronization. "God," she breathed, reading the data. "The networking consciousness. Each replacement subject is connected to a central neural hub. They're not just stealing memories, they're creating a hive mind." Security footage showed Emma in her office, simultaneously monitoring multiple surgical procedures across different operating rooms. Sarah watched in horror as her twin exhibited perfect knowledge of each case, anticipating complications before they arose, directing multiple surgical teams with impossible precision. She's accessing other doctors' experiences in real time, Sarah realized. Every replacement they create adds to their collective knowledge. They're building a network of perfectly coordinated duplicates. A message popped up on Emma's calendar. Phase 3 implementation. Final review. Attached was a list of prominent figures, hospital board members, pharmaceutical executives, medical technology pioneers, all scheduled for voluntary treatment trials in the coming month. "It's not just about replacing individuals anymore," Sarah told Thomas over their secured line. "They're creating an interconnected system of duplicates, each one sharing the combined knowledge and skills of the entire network." Emma's not just department head. She's becoming a node in a living supercomputer made of stolen minds. Sarah discovered more as she dug deeper. Project Mirror had evolved from simple identity theft to something far more ambitious. The replacements weren't just taking over positions of power. They were reshaping entire institutions from within, guided by their shared consciousness. But the code revealed something even more chilling. In the neural network's base programming, Sarah found fragments of familiar patterns, cognitive algorithms she'd developed during her residency, theoretical work she'd never published, work that had been in her private journals, the ones Emma had studied so carefully. "I was never the target," Sarah whispered, the truth finally dawning. "I was the prototype. Emma didn't just steal my life. She used my research to make Project Mirror possible. Every person they've replaced since then has been processed using my own theories about consciousness transfer." The sound of footsteps made her freeze. Through the office window, she saw Emma approaching, surrounded by a group of blank-faced doctors moving in perfect synchronization, a chorus of mirrors, each reflecting a fragment of stolen humanity. The first incident occurred during Sarah's 36-hour shift in the trauma unit. Mrs. Rodriguez, a post-op patient, grasped her hand during morning rounds and thanked her profusely for the midnight visit. "You were so kind, Dr. Chen, sitting with me for an hour, telling me about your own grandmother's heart surgery." Sarah's grandmother had never had heart surgery. By noon, 3 more patients mentioned conversations she'd never had. Nurse Jenkins praised her impromptu lecture on post-traumatic stress management in the break room. During hours she'd been elbow-deep in emergency surgery. Her resident, Dr. Parker, referenced treatment suggestions she'd supposedly made for a complicated case, ideas that actually contradicted her standard protocol. "Are you feeling all right, Dr. Chen?" Dr. Parker asked, concern creasing his forehead. "You just told me something completely different last night." Sarah pulled up the security footage from the previous evening. The timestamp read 8:47 p.m., showing her walking confidently through the surgical ward, except she'd been in O3 until midnight. The woman in the video moved with her exact gait, wore her distinctive silver watch, even tucked her hair behind her ear, the same way Sarah did when thinking. Only someone who'd studied her for years could replicate those unconscious habits with such precision. Her phone lit up with a text from James. "Missing you already. Last night was incredible. That new thing you did." Sarah's heart stopped. She'd been on call last night. She hadn't seen James in 3 days. When she called her parents to discuss Emma's increasingly concerning behavior, their response chilled her more than any hospital ghost. "Sweetheart, you're working too hard," her mother soothed. "Emma's been so worried about you. She says you've been forgetting conversations, mixing up schedules. Maybe you should take a break before the wedding?" That evening, Sarah installed hidden cameras in her apartment. The footage made her physically ill. Emma, letting herself in with a key Sarah hadn't given her. Emma, spending hours in Sarah's closet, trying on her clothes, practicing her expressions in the mirror. Emma, methodically going through Sarah's medical journals, photographing pages of patient notes. Most disturbing was the kitchen footage. Emma, wearing Sarah's favorite pajamas, carefully opening her tea canister, a small vial appearing from her pocket. 3 drops in the loose leaves, stood meticulously until no trace remained. Sarah took the tea to the hospital lab, calling in a favor from the toxicology department. The results showed traces of a new experimental drug, one designed to induce symptoms mimicking paranoid delusions and memory loss. In her office, Sarah found a patient file she didn't remember creating. The handwriting was perfect, the medical reasoning sound, but the signature at the bottom showed that subtle flourish she'd noticed before. Emma's flourish. Her twin wasn't just studying her life anymore. She was rehearsing for a permanent performance. Sarah first noticed the pattern during group therapy. Claire Townsend, former CEO of a biotech startup, claimed her board member sister had stolen her identity. Marcus Reynolds, a federal judge, insisted his cousin had replaced him after a suspicious mental breakdown. Each story was dismissed as paranoid delusion, yet Sarah caught the similarities. All victims were highly placed professionals, all replacements were close relatives, and all had been quietly stripped of their lives through seemingly legitimate medical channels. "They harvest more than just our identities," Claire whispered during recreation hour, her fingers nervously shredding a paper cup. "Watch their eyes when they take someone for special therapy in the basement. Nobody comes back quite the same." Sarah had dismissed this as typical asylum paranoia until she saw the orderlies wheel Marcus back from the red-tinted basement lab. The proud judge who'd quoted case law from memory now sat vacant-eyed, drooling slightly, unable to recall his own children's names. That night, Sarah broke into Dr. Harrison's office. His computer revealed a program codenamed Neural Mapping Initiative, a classified project using experimental technology to transfer memory patterns between subjects. The facility wasn't just imprisoning originals, it was extracting their knowledge, experiences, and personality patterns to perfect their replacements' performances. Fascinating research, isn't it? Sarah spun to find Emma in the doorway, wearing a perfect replica of her own shocked expression. Her twin was dressed in Sarah's favorite blue surgical scrubs, carrying her personalized stethoscope. "The human brain is amazing," Emma continued, moving into the room with Sarah's characteristic grace. "Did you know it takes approximately 60 hours of direct neural scanning to completely map someone's memory patterns? The pain is excruciating, of course, but the results..." She smiled, tapping her temple. "Well, just ask your fiancé if he's noticed any differences in bed." "You're a monster," Sarah whispered. "No, sister. I'm you. Better than you, actually. Your patient satisfaction scores have improved 12% since I took over. Even mom and dad prefer this version of their daughter." Emma's face shifted, displaying Sarah's exact expression of clinical concern. "Your procedure is scheduled for tomorrow. Don't worry, we'll keep enough of your consciousness intact to help us refine the process. Think of it as your contribution to medical science." Through the office window, Sarah watched a new patient being wheeled toward the basement, red light spilling ominously from the lab doors. On the gurney's chart, she glimpsed the words "Original Subject T," followed by a number. She had until morning to escape, or she'd become just another number in their catalog of stolen souls. Sarah's hands trembled as she activated the tiny camera hidden in her necklace pendant. Sunday family dinner, a Chen tradition she'd never missed, even during her residency. Tonight, she'd use their expectations against them. The signs of Emma's drugging attempts had become impossible to ignore: dizziness, confusion, gaps in her memory. But now, Sarah had adapted her body's tolerance, allowing her to maintain consciousness even as the world grew hazy. "You seem tired, sweetheart," her mother observed, sliding the bowl of soup closer. The same concern in her voice that had once soothed childhood fevers now carried an undercurrent of anticipation. Sarah caught the quick glance between her parents as she lifted the spoon to her lips. 20 minutes later, right on schedule, the roux began to spin. Sarah let her head loll forward, her spoon clattering to the table. Through nearly closed eyes, she watched her family's masks dissolve. Finally, Emma sighed, rising smoothly from her chair. The dosage is perfect this time. No trace in the blood work, just like they promised. Their father checked Sarah's pulse with practiced efficiency. Good, natural. The hospital board won't question a stress-induced breakdown, especially with the documentation we've been building. "Help me move her to the study," Emma directed. "We need to practice the positioning for when the paramedics arrive." "Mom," called Dr. Harrison. "Tell him it's time for the contingency we discussed." Sarah felt her body being lifted, her mother's fingers trembling as they brushed her arm. "She'll be happier this way," Linda Chen whispered, more to herself than the others. Sarah was always too rigid, too focused on rules. Emma understands what needs to be done. In the study, they arranged her limply on the leather sofa. Sarah fought to maintain her shallow breathing as Emma bent over her, studying her face with clinical precision. 3 years of preparation, Emma murmured. Every expression, every gesture, every medical decision pattern mapped and memorized. "The board will see exactly what they expect," brilliant Dr. Sarah Chen, crushed under the pressure of her perfectionism. "The facility is ready," their father reported, ending a phone call. "Top-tier security, complete privacy, the experts at handling replacement cases." "Michael," their mother interrupted, voice cracking. "Are you sure this is the only way?" She stood up, daughter. "Linda." Their father's tone held the same authority that had ended childhood arguments. "We've been over this. The project needs Sarah's position, her connections. Emma's been trained. She'll do more good with Sarah's life than Sarah ever could. Sometimes sacrifices are necessary for the greater good." Emma's cool fingers traced Sarah's cheekbone. "Don't worry, sister. I'll be a better you than you ever were. Your patience, your fiancé, your whole life. I'll perfect it all. And you'll be safely tucked away, helping us understand how to make the next replacement even more seamless." Sarah felt a needle slide into her arm. As genuine unconsciousness approached, she heard her twin whisper, "Sweet dreams, Sarah. When you wake up, you'll be the copy, and I'll be the real thing." The water in the facility's reservoir was 39 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to slow her heart rate, but not quite cold enough to kill her. Sarah had calculated this precisely when she stole the pharmaceuticals from the medical cabinet. 2 cc's of propofol to simulate death, a carefully measured dose of beta blockers to maintain minimal cardiac function, and an experimental stimulant she'd taken from Dr. Harrison's private store to counter the hypothermia. They declared her dead at 3:47 a.m. By 4:15, her corpse had been disposed of in the reservoir, following the facility's protocol for failed subjects. At 4:32, Thomas Jackson, a homeless veteran who lived under the nearby bridge, spotted what he thought was another victim of the facility's dark practices. Instead, he found a barely breathing doctor who whispered detailed instructions for revival between blue-tinged lips. 2 weeks later, Sarah sat in Thomas's makeshift shelter, surrounded by evidence of Project Mirror's true scope. Her medical training had saved her life, but Thomas's street network was saving her sanity. Through his connections, other homeless individuals who had witnessed the facility's midnight disposals, she pieced together patterns spanning decades. "They've been doing this since the 80s, Thomas explained, spreading out newspapers he'd collected. Always the same. Prominent person has breakdown, relative steps in, original disappears. Nobody notices because the replacements are perfect." Sarah studied the articles. A state governor whose policies suddenly shifted after a stress-induced retreat. A Supreme Court justice whose legal interpretations changed following a health scare. Each case accompanied by a family photo showing the subject with an eerily similar relative. Using a borrowed laptop, Sarah hacked into Emma's email. Her twin had always used variations of Sarah's passwords, a habit that now proved useful. The correspondence revealed Project Mirror's infrastructure, shell companies, offshore accounts, and a network of facilities like Evergreen across the country. Each replacement was connected to others, forming a web of doubles slowly infiltrating positions of power. Most disturbing were the emails from their parents. They weren't just facilitating Emma's replacement of Sarah. They were regional directors for Project Mirror, responsible for identifying potential candidates. Their father's pharmaceutical company didn't just supply hospitals, it developed the drugs used in neural mapping procedures. Their mother's mental health advocacy work provided perfect cover for committing unstable originals. Your sister's rising fast, Thomas noted, showing Sarah a medical journal announcement. Youngest department head in Boston General's history, pioneering work in memory and consciousness studies. Sarah's hands trembled as she read Emma's research paper, recognizing the clinical trial protocols. Her twin wasn't just stealing her life, she was preparing to expand Project Mirror's technology to a terrifying new scale. They're not just replacing people anymore, Sarah whispered. They're building an army of perfect imposters, all connected, all working towards some larger goal. And my own blood is helping them do it. The Evergreen Wellness Center's security system had been Sarah's salvation plan. She'd memorized the guard rotations, mapped the blind spots in the camera coverage, and bribed a maintenance worker for access codes. But as she sprinted down the East Corridor at 2 a.m., her escape route dissolved before her eyes. Every door she tried was mysteriously locked, every passage blocked by routine maintenance, every potential alley suddenly occupied elsewhere. Dr. Chen. The security guard's voice echoed through the hallway. Your sister warned us you might try this again. Sarah froze. Again? She turned to see Thomas, the head of security who had never met her before today, approaching with practiced concern. Behind him stood Dr. Harrison, her former mentor, and 2 nurses she'd never seen. Sarah, please. Dr. Harrison stepped forward, using the same gentle tone he used with agitated patients. Emma's told us everything. The pressure of your position, the wedding plans, the increasing paranoid episodes. Let us help you. Emma is stealing my life. Sarah's voice cracked with desperation. Call the hospital. Check the security footage. She's been impersonating me for months. Dr. Harrison's sad smile turned her blood to ice. I did call the hospital, Sarah. I spoke with you, or who you claim was Emma, just an hour ago. You were performing emergency surgery on a car crash victim. Successfully, I might add, just like you've done hundreds of times before. Sarah's mind raced. That's impossible. I've been here for... How long had she been here? The days had begun to blur together, marked only by Emma's visits, each one showcasing how perfectly she'd captured another piece of Sarah's life. Show her. Dr. Harrison nodded to a nurse, who produced a tablet. The video showed Sarah, no, Emma, in surgical scrubs, confidently directing her team through a complex procedure. Every gesture was perfect, every command delivered in Sarah's precise tone. In the background, Sarah could see Dr. Parker, her resident, responding to Emma's instructions with absolute trust. Your sister's been managing your cases brilliantly, Dr. Harrison continued. The board is impressed with how you've maintained your surgical excellence despite your emotional challenges. Emma's been a tremendous support, ensuring your patients don't suffer during your treatment. A new figure appeared in the hallway, and Sarah's world tilted sideways. James, her fiancé, looking at her with a mixture of pity and concern. But his hand was intertwined with Emma's, his body unconsciously leaning toward her twin in a way that spoke of intimate familiarity. Honey, Emma's voice was perfectly calibrated to Project Loving Worry. You need to stop this. Remember what Dr. Harrison said about accepting help. James, and I just want you to get better. James squeezed Emma's hand, the hand wearing Sarah's engagement ring. Listen to your sister, babe. Emma's been amazing, taking care of everything while you heal. The wedding plans, your patience, our life together. She's kept it all running perfectly, just like you would want. Sarah saw it then, in James's eyes. He genuinely didn't know. In his mind, he was still with his Sarah. Emma's performance was so flawless, so precise, that even the man who shared her bed couldn't tell the difference. The package arrived on Sarah Chen's doorstep at exactly 7:28 am, the same time she'd entered the world 28 years ago, 4 minutes before her identical twin Emma. The precision of its delivery didn't strike her as odd until later, much later, when everything else started making terrible sense. Sarah nearly missed the brown paper-wrapped parcel, her mind already running through her morning surgery schedule at Boston General. 6 years of medical training had honed her naturally methodical nature into something approaching perfectionism. But there it sat, innocuous yet demanding attention, her name written in Emma's distinctive flowing script. Inside, she found a handmade scrapbook bound in burgundy leather, the cover embossed with golden letters spelling out 2 hearts, 1 soul. The sentiment made Sarah smile, even as something in her stomach tightened. Emma had always been the more sentimental twin, prone to grand gestures that seemed to require no reciprocation. The first page held their birth announcement. Identical twin girls born to Michael and Linda Chen. Below it, in Emma's handwriting, the beginning of us. Simple enough, but Sarah's surgeon's eyes caught the detail others might miss. Emma had pressed so hard writing us that the pen had nearly torn the paper. As she turned the pages, chronologically arranged from infancy through their recent years, that nameless unease grew stronger. The photos were arranged in pairs. Sarah learning to walk, then Emma in the same pose. Sarah's first day of kindergarten, then Emma's photo recreating the exact same stance. Sarah's high school graduation speech, and Emma watching from the audience, her hands folded precisely as Sarah's were at the podium. Her phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "Happy birthday, sister. Found Almond's old photos and couldn't resist making you something special. Don't you love how in sync we've always been?" Sarah's coffee grew cold as she studied the images more carefully. What first appeared as cute moments of twin mimicry took on a different character through her medical researcher's eye. The later photos showed Emma's imitations becoming more precise, more studied. A Halloween photo from medical school. Sarah laughing with colleagues. Emma in the background, silently mouthing her sister's words, matching every gesture. The last page held a single photo from last week's hospital fundraiser. Sarah hadn't even seen Emma there. But there she was, half hidden behind a column, wearing an outfit identical to Sarah's, her hair styled the same way, practicing Sarah's signature on a donor card. When Sarah called their mother to ask about the photos, Linda Chen laughed softly. "Emma's always been your biggest fan, honey. Isn't it sweet how she looks up to you?" But as Sarah ended the call, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. In her own signature on a recent patient's chart, she saw the same subtle flourish that Emma had been practicing in that final photo, a flourish that hadn't been there before.